So now let's talk about sight picture. We have our sights aligned on what it is that we want to destroy, and the two of those things between sight alignment and sight picture make up what I call our sight package. Our sight package is size of the target and distance relative to the target. So what I'm looking at and what you have to look at is, as an overall sight package, size of the target and distance relative to the target is always changing. Now you might be up close, but you go from making an easy torso shot to a hostage rescue shot. The sight package, I believe, also influences the trigger. And we'll talk about that later on in trigger control, but it's going to determine whether or not you do a compressed break or whether you have to stage the trigger because you're taking a critical shot. Now, as we talk about this sight alignment and tracking of our front sight, I look at it like this. I need you to see your sight, track your sight, and check your work through your sight. So checking work is based on behavior. See my sight, is it there? If it is, fire. How good does it need to be? Only good enough to make the shot. Then what I look at is tracking that front sight. So once that gun goes off and it goes into recoil, the next thing that I look at is, does the gun recover back to you being able to make that shot again? If it does, what are your parameters? Are you holding so flat within this 6-inch square that you can speed up? If so, go faster. If all of a sudden you're coming outside that area, then you need to slow down. So what we look at is we look at getting very important information back in determining whether or not you can speed up or slow down while not compromising your accuracy. So if all of a sudden I do see my front sight's about to come out what is acceptable, then I slow down. If I'm still maintaining here when I could maintain this, then I increase my speed. So see your sights, track your sights, check your work. You want to shoot fast, you have to see fast. And of course, I'm not talking about compromising ever accuracy. I'm saying that as accurate as you need to be in order to make that shot. Now, when we look at behavior, typically we have a paper target right here. If we shoot this target, we know we're successful in this area if that's what you've deemed. And we know that any shots over in here or outside that area are misses, okay? Because you set the parameters, I didn't. So with that said, I get information back. I see my sight, I track my sight, I have some misses, and then of course, I try to fix them. But when we're shooting a real life person, we have clothing, t-shirts, jackets, sweaters. How do I determine whether I'm successful or not? I generally determine that based on behavior. So if I was to fight somebody, compliance to me is the guys on the ground. That lets me know that whatever punch, kick, stuns, choke out, whatever it is that you're doing, you are being successful because the guy is on the ground. I do the same thing with shooting a gun. If I have to put bullets on a guy, I am looking at judging, am I successful based on changing his behavior? He is now on the ground. I know that I was doing good work. So when we look at this, it's extremely important because we're getting back vital information. Now, if you can't answer where my sight's on target, and if you can't answer, well, after I fired the gun, I don't know where my sights were because I never tracked it, how can you answer whether or not you were successful on changing his behavior in the first place? You have to be able to go, I saw my sight, it's on him, fire. After you shoot, are your sights back on target or back on what's acceptable? If the answer is yes, and I put 8 shell casings in the air, and the whole time I'm holding dead center, I'm good to go, and he's still shooting at me, something's wrong. At that point, I go to ulterior target locations, which might be pelvic girdle and or the face. Why? I don't care about why right now. What I care about is solving the problem, which is how do I win? How do I change his behavior? And at that point, I'm trying to get him on the ground as quick as possible. Later on, I can determine he was doped up. Later on, I can determine, oh, wow, he's got body armor on, or he's like San Bernardino, he's got plate carriers as well. So all those factors can be determined later, but this information that you're getting back is extremely vital. We also know that we have hard focus front sight, soft focus rear sight. Which one do we pay attention to when we start to overlay that on the target? Primarily what we're focusing on is that front sight. The rear sight's there, but it's not what I'm concentrating on 100%. I'm really focusing more on my front sight. That is the importance here. So I am looking at first, making sure that my front sight's where it needs to be. Through tracking the front sight, I speed up or slow down. And then of course, the desired result is I want him on the ground. I've changed his behavior. You can't answer the behavior question if you can't answer the other questions. Because if you're too busy not watching your front sight, or it's missing, right, it's going off target, then maybe the reason why he's not on the ground is because you've never shot him and hit him in the first place. So it's extremely important that if you want to answer that last question of changing his behavior, you have to always answer the other two. And remember what I said earlier, you want to shoot fast, you have to see fast. You're always looking for information. Your gun, the whole time, your sights have been talking to you. Whether you choose to pick up on that or not is going to be up to you. So see our sights, track our sights, check our work through our sights. We have a real life human being that we're here engaging. Hard focus front sight, soft focus rear sight, and then the last thing Brian Enos wrote in a book, it's an older book when I used to shoot competitively, it was called The Fundamentals of Shooting. You can only focus on typically one of two things. If I focus in on you, anything in front of me is slightly obscured or slightly blurry. And if I'm focused on anything up close, anything to the rear of that becomes less refined. When we bring our sights up on target, typically you're focusing on one or the other. Now, when you're in a law enforcement role, shoot, no shoot scenarios, when you're doing military style operations that are similar to law enforcement, civilians being justified in a good shoot, you are generally focusing on the threat. Guy pulls a gun, I'm focusing on the threat. Depending upon your distance, it is hard in some cases to bring a gun up. Focus not just on the weapon, but on the guy as well. I can only focus on generally one of two things. So up close, I'm usually more focused on the suspect or the guy immediately in front of me. That's generally my main concern. And then my sights become less refined. Now, no matter what, we're still hard focused more on the front than we are on the rear. The rear becomes like a Scooby-Doo kind of fog to me. So remember that as we're bringing our sights up, it's hard to have perfect clarity on rear, front, and a target, because just in normal life, I can only focus on one of two things. Another thing to think about in regards to shooting and engaging, if you read different mindset books like Grossman, On Combat, On Killing, Galvin DeBeck, Wes Doss, one of the things that Grossman talks about is focusing from the threat to infinity. Okay, so for most shooters, when they're in a deadly force situation, they're focusing on the threat to infinity. This is hard sometimes to reverse focus back to your sights as you start to shoot. Now, we know typically if I'm aiming the gun, I am looking at the target, the gun is coming up on the target, and then I'm looking from front sight, so I'm going beyond rear to front to target, and then it's a quick verification of, is it in alignment? Yes, it is, and then I'm firing. But typically I'm focusing on the threat to infinity, which makes it sometimes a challenge depending upon the environment that you're in, maybe low light, no light, maybe you pulled somebody over and it's dark now. There's a lot of different things that could prevent you from getting a good sight picture, a good sight alignment perfectly when you're under that kind of stress and about to get engaged and shot at. So sometimes we focus from the threat to infinity, and it is hard for our eyes to shift back to the gun. That's why during training, it's extremely important for you to always be looking for your sights, always trying to get that information back, so that if for some reason you do come off of them, your eyes are constantly going, where are they, where are they, where are they, and trying to find them as quickly as they can. So at the end of the day, these are going to be some things that you're going to have to work through. Remember, see your sights, track your sights, check your work through your sights, and that ultimate work is determining human behavior. I want distance away from the target. That's what the gun gives me. The gun gives me distance. Distance buys me time. I'm using a projectile that does 1,200 feet per second to give me the distance away from that guy. I can't run that fast. The round's going to move from point A to point B. So again, we're looking at a combination of sight alignment, sight picture, which makes up our sight package.